Hi, my name is Dave Whitlock. I live in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and I want to show you how to do something really fun. You're familiar with the fact that when water freezes, it expands. That's what breaks pipes, cracks engine blocks, tears up sidewalks, breaks cement. We all know how this goes. We spend hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars as a nation or a world protecting ourselves from the unstoppable force of ice expanding in our walls and tearing down our homes. We've never used that to drive machinery, generate electricity. So much force just laying there and no one's using it. So I'm going to teach you how to use this force to drive machinery. Crazy, huh? It's impossible. No. Simple. Absolutely. You're going to need a jar, like a jelly jar, okay? And you're going to poke a hole in the lid. This one doesn't have one. I'm just showing you how, all right? So inside of the jar, you're going to put a water balloon, all right? Now, if we had a jar full of water and put it in the freezer, then when the water freezes and expands, it's going to destroy the jar. If the lid's on, even without the lid, most likely it's going to destroy the jar and it's going to shatter and it's going to make a mess in your freezer. And your mom or your wife is going to, or your husband is going to get very upset with you, and you don't want that. But if you put a water balloon in the freezer, and there's even some crafts I won't mention, you know, like putting food coloring into the water and then freezing it so that you have decorative things in the winter, but that's between you and me, don't worry about it. So anyway, you take the water balloon and you put it into the freezer. When it freezes, the balloon expands, but it still contains the volume of the liquid involved. So you don't get an explosion all over your freezer and make a mess that you get chewed out for it. This is better. So if you had a balloon that was about 50% of the volume of the jar that you're holding in your other hand, that would be ideal. I'm using a smaller one so that I can just drop it in. Now, you take the lid that you would ideally have a hole drilled into the top of. You might even have a little nut glued, epoxied on here, and you'll understand why in a second, all right? Because you're going to take a hypodermic, you're going to cut off the needle end. We don't like needles. We're just going to take that needle, we're going to bend it, you know, cut it up, cut it off, put it in the trash safely, get rid of it safely. You don't want anybody getting poked. And then it turns out that your regular hypodermic needle, 1 cc hypodermic needle available at any pharmacy, diabetic uncle, you know, choking, you know, out there, fits perfectly into a 1/4 inch compression fitting. Now, the compression fittings are available at any plumbing or hardware store, and you take the hypodermic and you put it into the 1/4 inch compression fitting and tighten it down really good so that you get a nice watertight seal. Watertight seal, watertight seal. Very important. I'll say it a few more times, quite possibly. So then you're going to have this filled with antifreeze. Aha, now you see where I'm going. So we had a water balloon now suspended in a jar full of antifreeze. This jar has a hole in the top, and like I said, you might have the nut that goes to the other end of this, epoxied, you know, welded, whatever you want onto here with a watertight seal. Then you get all the air bubbles out, and you'll have this partially filled or even almost completely filled with antifreeze ethyl glycol. Why? Why do we have the jar and this? It's because we don't like air bubbles. We're going to get rid of those, all right? So that you fill it up, you know, the last little drops, the last little bits to where it's, you know, it's level, it's even bulging, you know, the surface tension that we're all fascinated by, you know, and then you take this and you begin to screw it in and it leaks around the edges, which is why I'm not doing it now because it's kind of messy. And so it, you know, it leaks around the edges and all the air, you know, you screw it in about halfway and then you push this down to where you've got about a 1/2 inch between the brass fitting and the bottom of the plunger. And that's also going to make even more of the antifreeze come out, but it's also going to get rid of all the air bubbles in there. And then you tighten it down all the way, and you've got, you know, one complete item here that is a water balloon in a jar filled with antifreeze. Some antifreeze goes up into the piston. It's all got a watertight seal. And you take this and you put it in the freezer. Now what's going to happen when you put it in the freezer? The antifreeze is not going to freeze. That's why we call it antifreeze. Good marketing. Water, on the other hand, does freeze in your freezer. And it's going to expand 9% by volume. It's going to pressurize the ethyl glycol. That's going to cause the piston to move upwards. The plunger is going to move upwards. Depending on how much water you have and, you know, other factors involved, that's going to determine how far it moves up. Before you put it in the freezer, take a permanent marker, like this one, and put a mark where the plunger is. When you take it out of the freezer, it's going to be higher. Put a mark where the plunger is then. Set it out, let it thaw, all right? It'll pull back down. If it doesn't generate enough negative pressure on the inside to pull the plunger back down, you can put a rubber band around it. That'll help pull it down. As long as your water balloon holds up, you can move it in and out of your freezer, letting it freeze and thaw all you want, moving the piston up and down. Now, if you want it to go faster than that, what I recommend is that you have something like, well, what I call a thermal path. So this is a little thin piece of silver that runs through, and inside of here, trapped inside of this block of Lexan sheets stacked on top of each other, trapped between steel plates, inside of here is about 2.5 cubic centimeters of water and, I don't know, maybe 4 cubic centimeters, 3 cubic centimeters of ethyl glycol, and they've got a little flexible membrane in between them. The key factor is that the water is in direct contact with the silver. And so I can touch one piece of silver to cold. That'll cause this to rise about 1/4 inch. And then I can touch the other side. I can disconnect from the cold and connect to hot. And that causes this to come back down. I've got rubber bands on it. These provide about 2 pounds of resistance to the piston. It's nothing. This thing will show in another video some of the tricks that this piston can do. This works. This is the same thing as this, okay? And you could go to a hydraulic supplier and get parts off the shelf rated for 40,000, 50,000 PSI. Water, the maximum pressure that it will generate when it freezes, or the maximum resistance it will overcome when it freezes, depending on how you want to phrase it, is 43,511.33 pounds per square inch, a little bit over 21 3/4 tons per square inch of pressure that it can manifest, and it does so at 27 degrees below 0 Celsius. And there's a handful of neat little tricks for maximizing your return on the hot, cold investment. You can make it go faster. You can make it powerful up to that 43,511.33333 PSI. But the key thing is that anywhere that you have hot and cold, Arctic Circle, upper atmosphere, solar collection for the heat, moon, Mars, asteroid belt, any airless rock floating in space, in line of sight of the sun, within a reasonable distance. We want to collect heat as well. You've got all the hot and cold you need for basically free energy. And expanding on the definition of the word free in free energy, there's no patent. It's yours. This is open source, this is public domain. Run with it, have fun, innovate with it, make the world better, expand into space, put colonies on the moon and Mars. I'd love to visit, and have fun with it. Have a blast. You don't have to send me a penny. I'm not making anybody do anything. All right, if you want to send me stuff, hey, that's really cool. I'd love to see what you do with it, okay? And I've got other projects I want to build, and I'm going to have to collect resources for that as well. But this is too important and too simple, really, for me to feel comfortable charging for it. Just run with it. This is yours. Ice. When water freezes, it expands with an unstoppable force that you can now use to generate electricity, or run your car, or your airplane, or help power your EM drive over there, NASA. Yeah, have fun with it. It's yours.